Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is my favorite new Commander deck that I have built for myself. So I do tend to talk about my own decks on my channel a lot. I reference them in videos, cards that I put in those decks and whatnot. That is why I originally, a long time ago, ended up posting all of my own personal decks on my channel. Did that over a year ago, about a year and a half ago. It is the most viewed video on my channel right now. I also did an update of all my newer decks and also the ones I got rid of. Did that one back in March after the year anniversary of the original one, obviously. Again, because I reference my decks a lot. For example, I talk about my Denic deck a lot in videos and people are always asking me, hey, can we see what this deck's doing? How did you end up building it? So when I make videos like that, then I can just point people to that video so they can go look at it. So I did the update video where I talked about the decks that I have added and also the decks I have minused. And since I made that video, so in the past about 6 months or so, I have added a few more new decks. In particular, my Benny Brax deck and my Bralin deck. I've actually added 3 new decks to my collection since I made that video. These are 2 of them. My Bralin deck, again, I have referenced already quite a few times on my channel. It is simply just a mono red discard theme. It is doing the partner without idea that I came up with in one of my deck ideas videos, where you're basically taking one of the partner with commanders and just doing it solo. I'm just playing Bralin. There is no shark riding here going on at all. And Benny Brax, as I just talked about in my Commanders I Was Wrong About video, which I will be referencing again here right away. I just thought this was going to be a really popular commander in the format and wasn't at all. And because nobody else wants to go after it, I certainly will. Obviously, it's just a token theme, but I sort of went deep with the interesting token creation strategies that I could go in that deck. So I like that deck a lot as well. However, it's not my new favorite deck, and it is also not my only mono white deck that I've put together recently. In that Commanders I Was Wrong About video, I also talked about AO the Dawn Sky, which is the commander that I will be talking about here. 3 white, Dragon Spirit, Flying Vigilance, 5/4. When it dies, look at the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of non-land permanent cards with total mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order, or you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or vehicle. So the reason why I had this on that list is it isn't as popular as I thought it would be, sure, but also I actually was wrong about this card where I read it incorrectly. The wording there is important. Put any number of non-land permanent cards with total mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield. So you can't just grab a bunch of 4 drops and throw them onto the battlefield. It has to be total mana value 4. And so when I discovered that, that made me like this commander a lot less. However, as I was making that video, what I realized is, hold on, total mana value 4 means that I can put a bunch of cards in this deck that don't cost anything at all, and I'll essentially get them for free, right? And that's sort of the idea I went with here, okay? So before I get to what the deck is actually doing, I'm going to talk about some cards that I put in the deck that I think are just phenomenal fits in an AO the Dawn Sky deck. So first of all, our commander is going to be dying a lot. We need recursion, so Loyal Retainers is a great one. 2 and a white Human Advisor, 1/1. Sacrifice at return target legendary card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And of course, it's a permanent card that we can get with our commander's ability, put it directly into play, and then get our commander immediately back after it dies, because we do want our commander to be dying all the time. Sigil of the New Dawn is another fantastic way to repeatedly get your commander back. Again, it is a 4 mana value permanent, 3 and a white enchantment. Whenever a creature is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a white. If you do, return it to your hand. So we can have our commander die all the time, pay the 1 and a white and get it back so we can recast it. Enduring Renewal is really the best way here, and this probably should go in every AO deck and a lot of other decks as well. This is a card that probably could see more play. It is a little off-putting with some of the things that it is doing. 2 white enchantment. So again, it is a 4 mana value card that we can get with our commander. Play with your hand reveal. That's not great. I don't like showing people what I have in my hand. The reason they have this on the card is because, of course, they don't want any cheating going on. They could have worded this card differently so that you're not playing with your hand revealed, but nevertheless, it's part of what's going on here. If you would draw a card, reveal the top card of your library instead. If it's a creature card, put it into your graveyard, otherwise draw a card. So basically what's that saying is you just can't draw creatures. That's all. I will just point out though, this is a phenomenal fit in any recursion deck. If you're like say in a black-white recursion theme, you probably want creatures in your graveyard, right? So now you're going to reveal the creatures off the top of your library, throw them into your graveyard, which is probably where you want them. However, the most important part of this card is whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. So now every time we sack our commander, it's going to go back to our hand so that we can do it again. This is not a card that you just want to throw down on turn 4, right? You got to be careful with the timing of when you play it, but if you play it at the appropriate time, when you sort of have everything set up, it's going to be a great fit. There's not a ton of creatures in this deck. There's only 16, so it isn't really going to hurt us that much. And again, we are in a little bit of a recursion theme here, so throwing creatures into our graveyard isn't that bad. Yosei the Morningstar, also a fantastic fit here because it's doing a similar thing to what our commander's doing, right? It's the original mono white dragon that has that dice trigger. Target player skips their next untap step, tap up to 5 target permanents that player controls. So this can be a really great lockdown piece. And again, later in the game, we have our Enduring Renewal out, Sigil of the Dawn, all these repeatable recursion effects. This will work fantastic with what we're already doing. And Planar Collapse is a fantastic board wipe in permanent form, 1 and a white enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep if there are 4 or more creatures on the battlefield. Sacrifice Planar Collapse and destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. So why this, I think, particularly is good with AO is because we probably just sacrificed our commander. It's already in the graveyard. We put the Planar Collapse into play, destroy all our opponent's creatures. We don't really care because our commander's already dead. Also though, if our commander is on the battlefield, this is a way to get a dice trigger with our commander, right? Because it will destroy it as well. Another great fit in any AO deck, I think. And also Endless Horizons is a card that I ended up adding to this deck because, of course, our commander's ability is look at the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of non-land permanent cards. So we don't want to be revealing lands off the top of our library. Again, 3 and a white enchantment, so it is a permanent that we can get with our commander. When it enters the battlefield, we search our library for any number of plains cards, exile them, and then shuffle our library. And at the beginning of our upkeep, we can put a card from Exile with Endless Horizons into our hand. So we put those plains cards into our hand on our upkeep, and then we can play them on our main phase. Just ensures you have land drops. So it is a good card, but why it's particularly good here is because it is exiling all the lands out of our library. Now, I don't think I would take all of the plains out of our library, but you could take a bunch to really thin out your deck so that when your commander dies, you're not getting a bunch of lands in that top 7, right? The less lands we have, the more options we have to choose from. So that's why that card is particularly good in an AO deck. Again, these are all cards that I would put in any AO deck. Trading Post is another one. Again, another 4 mana card that we can get with our commander. It's an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap to discard a card and gain 4 life. You can pay 1 and tap, pay 1 life, create a 1 white goat creature token. Those are always good abilities to have. However, the last 2 abilities are the ones that are going to be important for us here. Pay 1 and tap, sacrifice a creature, return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a sack outlet, and we are going to need sack outlets in this deck to be sacrificing our commander. Also, pay 1, tap, sacrifice an artifact, draw a card, and that's going to be particularly good in this deck because we are in an artifact theme. That's right. That's what I decided to go with in this deck. This is a mono white artifact theme, and again, the reason why is because the more 0 drops we have in this deck, the more freebies we get, right? If I look at the top 7 cards on my library and I have, say, a Sigil of the New Dawn, which is what I want to put that into play, that's a 4 mana value card. So I've already got my total mana value of 4. However, if I got a couple of 0s in there as well, those are just freebies, right? Any 0s that I see in that top 7, I can just grab them on top of my Sigil of the New Dawn, and I get those as well. So if I have a Memnite or an Ornithopter in there, now I just get a free creature into play. And of course, if I'm going to be doing the 0 mana thing, it's almost assuredly going to be an artifact, right? So that's why I decided to go with the artifact theme here. Now, one stipulation here, and I have not yet put this deck together in paper, it's going to be expensive, okay? As we all know, 0 mana artifacts tend to be more expensive cards because they're more powerful. They're used in a lot of CDH decks and a lot of more powerful formats. That's just the way it is. No way of getting around that. Nevertheless, it works really good in this deck. I didn't even include all of them. I just included some of them. So for example, Jeweled Lotus, really expensive card, obviously, also extra fantastic in this deck because we can use it to recast our commander, which we will probably be doing a lot, and it costs 0 mana. So on top of whatever you're grabbing out of the top 7, you get your Jeweled Lotus for free, right? Mox Amber, Mox Opal, again, these are expensive cards, yes, but you're gonna get them for for free off the top when you look at those 7. Mishra's Bauble, again, another expensive card because it just happens to be used in a lot of different decks. This is just a free card draw, right? We're going to get that 0 mana artifact into play for nothing, and then we can sacrifice to look at the top card of target player's library and draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this just becomes a free card draw off of our commander's ability. I also have Mox Tantalite here, Lotus Bloom. These don't actually have a casting cost because of course they have Suspend, but they have a 0 mana value. So again, we can just include these for free when we're getting cards off the top of our library. A couple of great 1 mana includes in this deck that are artifacts. Of course, Esper Sentinel, a card that I probably would put in this deck anyway. Brainstone's a great fit here. Again, another 1 mana artifact. We can pay 2 and tap, sacrifice it to draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from our hand on top of our library in any order, which is particularly good here because for one, we are in a sacrifice artifact theme and a little bit of recursion theme as well. So any artifacts that are sacrificing are going to be great here, but also we want to put cards back on top of our library, right? If I have, say, that Lotus Bloom in my hand, I don't really want it in my hand. I want it on my library so my commander can cheat it into play. So now I can Brainstone, draw 3 cards, and put that Lotus Bloom back on top of my library so my commander can get it onto the battlefield. Gerard's Hourglass Pendant, one of my favorite cards from Dominaria United. This is a card that I'm starting to put in more and more decks. I love it a lot. Again, another 1 mana value artifact. It's legendary as well, has flash. If a player would begin an extra turn, that player skips that extra turn instead. That's always going to be nice, especially if you're not doing extra turns, which of course we're not in this deck. The most important part of this card though, pay 4 and tap, exile Gerard's Hourglass Pendant, return to the battlefield, tapped all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. And heck, if we get this off the top with our AO, well, our commander just went to the graveyard from the battlefield. So now we can immediately pay 4 to get this back. And again, because we're sort of in that sacrifice theme, you know, that eggs theme. If you've ever seen an eggs deck at work where I'm sacrificing a bunch of artifacts and then I get them back into play, this card works fantastically there. So if I get this off the top with my AO the Dawn Sky, now I sacrifice a bunch of my other artifacts like my Brainstone, for example, and then I can activate my Gerard's Hourglass Pendant and get them all back. Fantastic fit in the deck. And of course, because we're doing that, we're also going to put Second Sunrise and Faith's Reward in this deck as well. Again, Second Sunrise being the card that sort of was famously used with that eggs strategy. At the very least, we can just use these cards to get our commander back out of the graveyard after we sacrificed it, right? Of course, we're in a artifact theme in mono white. There's not a ton of support there, but Oswald Fiddlebender is obviously going to be the best fit because it's doing the sacrifice thing as well. So it is fitting everything we're doing in this deck. Phenomenal fit. Also happens to be a permanent with mana value 4 or less. Auriok Salvagers, another fantastic fit with what we're doing here. 3 and a white human soldier, 2/4. Pay 1 and a white. Return target artifact card with mana value 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Another 4 mana value permanent that we can get with our commander and fits phenomenally with everything we're doing in this deck. We can now pay 1 and a white, get that Mishra's Bauble back. And so this just becomes 2 mana draw card. Get that Brainstone back again, right? Get that Jeweled Lotus back again. That's a artifact with mana value 1 or less. There's like 20 cards in this deck that I can get back with my Auriok Salvagers. And again, because we're doing a lot of sacrificing, we can do it repeatedly over and over again. Scrap Trawler obviously is going to be a auto include in this strategy if you're doing a lot of artifact sacrificing themes, because it's going to be getting a lot of those back. I also threw Inspiring Statuary in the deck because, again, in an artifact theme that isn't in a typical color combination for artifacts, Inspiring Statuary is a great fit. 3 mana artifact, non-artifact spells you cast have Improvise. So now all these 0 mana artifacts we have lying around, we can start tapping them down, essentially using them as mana rocks to help cast our non-artifact spells. Great include in the deck. And I threw a really funny, interesting sort of semi-win con in the deck. I know people are always talking about win cons in decks. I attack with my commander for the most part to win games with this. So I have won a few games with commander damage, but another funny include in this deck as sort of a win con is Mere Incubator. I just threw this in here for fun. 6 mana artifact. You pay 6 and sacrifice Mere Incubator. So it costs more than 4, so we can't get with our commander. That's the one downside. However, it does fit the sacrifice theme. Search your library for any number of artifact cards, exile them, then create that many 1/1 colorless Mere artifact creature tokens. So just a funny way to close out a game, I think. There is 37 artifacts in this deck. Now, of course, you're going to have some in play. You might not want to exile all of them, but you could very easily get 30 1/1 mirror artifact creature tokens into play with this, which is pretty darn good. It's not just going to straight up end the game, but it's going to end it pretty quick. I would probably wait until I've already knocked out 1 or 2 opponents before I use this, because it can be bad for you to exile all your artifacts, obviously, but it is just a funny, neat win con in this deck. I absolutely love this deck. You know, I had this funny idea of, okay, well, it's total mana value 4, which isn't great, but if I throw a bunch of 0 mana things in there, I could grab as many zeros off the top 7 as I want, and I basically get those for free. In fact, I can get 4 things that cost 1 and 3 things that cost 0 and end up getting 7 things into play. I haven't done that yet. I've gotten as much as 5 things off of my AO the Dawn Sky. That's really good value, right? And I thought, boy, wouldn't that be funny to make a mono white artifact theme with this? And let's not forget, you do have that other ability as well, right? And I have used that where I get to the point where I have a lot of like little artifact creatures in play. And again, with your mirror incubator, you can make all those mirror tokens, have your commander die, and put 2+1/+1 counters on each of them. So now they're all 3/3s. That could actually close out the game a lot faster. So your commander does have that sort of built-in ability on it as well, where it is helping you move towards victory. Usually with this deck, I have my commander die like 3 or 4 times. And once I get my board full of a bunch of stuff, then I can start either keep my commander around and attack with it as a Voltron threat, or I can have my commander now die and start putting counters on my stuff to help close out the game. It's a super value-y deck, which is the kind of decks that I love. It is obviously not a very popular commander, which is also what I love. It's mono white, which I love, and it is doing something very out of the box, which I really, really love as well. My favorite new deck for sure. I'm hoping to put it together in paper, but again, there is a lot of really expensive cards in this deck, unfortunately, so it might take a little while. I did throw the deck list in the description below for you guys if you want to do it yourself. It is a really fun deck, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.